The most ridiculous beauty launches of 2019. Let's get into it. Hello, everybody. Yes, today we're going to be talking about the most ridiculous beauty launches of 2019. I say ridiculous as a fun title. I don't say it as a means to insult whoever had this idea, whoever came up with these concepts. I don't mean to insult these brands. I'm just laughing at them in good fun. But before we get started, let me just introduce myself. My name is Anya, and I run this YouTube channel onto which I post videos like about 4 to 5 times a week, and we basically talk about makeup, obviously. We also talk about consumerism, which is always super fun, and we just talk about the makeup industry just in general, because I love talking about it, you guys love listening to it, and it's just lots of fun here on this channel. So if you're interested in seeing any of my videos, check them out down below. Also, I have an Instagram onto which I post colorful makeup tutorials, colorful makeup looks, and yes, I said tutorials because I basically post a whole bunch of videos on IGTV all the time. So if you're interested in seeing my colorful makeup tutorials, IGTV is a great source for that because I basically publish all of them on there, and I'll put it on the screen so you know what it looks like. But with that being said, let's just get into this video because there is a ton to talk about and I am caffeinated, so let's get started. So the first ridiculous release I want to talk about would be the Morphe foundation, and I'm calling this a ridiculous release because oh my goodness, I remember when Jacqueline Hill posted this on her Snapchat, she was like, this is going to be the best foundation of the entire year. Is it, Jacqueline? Is it? The shade range was a range, which was a good step in the right direction. I'm not quite sure why they had gray undertones in this foundation setup though. So there's that. But the thing is, I remember seeing reviews from people that were saying, this foundation is so bad, and the fact that Morphe and Jacqueline Hill and all the other Morphe code people were saying that it was, amazing is kind of interesting. Oh yes, I also want to talk about this launch right here. This is the Kat Von D Beauty Shade and Light Contour Duos. This was basically Kat Von D taking their Shade and Light palette, which in and of itself is an iconic palette, and just breaking it up into duos, thus making it more accessible to people who didn't necessarily want to get the entire palette, which is a good idea. However, see, here's the thing. I feel like this would have been so much better received if it had happened sooner, because the Shade and Light palette by this point had been around for years, and this kind of idea seems to be like an idea that you would come up with like this, you know what I mean? Hey, yeah, I have a palette of Shade and Light stuff, so let's just come out with several, more edited, condensed duos, you know what I mean? You would think that they would think about it right just then and there, and they would roll out these releases just a year or even a few months after they rolled out the Shade and Light palette, but no, that did not happen. They basically released this in this year after the Kat Von D scandals happened, after people stopped buying that much from Kat Von D. So in that way, I feel like this release would have been amazing, but due to the timing, it fell flat, therefore being ridiculous in my book. Oh yes, I also wanted to talk about the Tarte Remakes Natural Palette. Do you remember this palette? Probably not. See, the thing is, this palette was essentially a $24 palette. You have a lot of different shades in here. The reason why I think that this palette just is ridiculous in my mind is because you literally had no color story in here, and you had no rhyme or reason to any of the shades. I mean, I can envision mixing this palette with some other palettes, but for example, you have colorful just blue colors, and then you have a random pink, a random purple, gold, and then everything else is neutral. So you essentially could have just rearranged some things. You could have just added a color there, taken away some colors here, and you could have just made this into a really pretty condensed array of blue, pink, and purple, but instead it looks like they literally try to stuff a tiny palette in with so many different colors. It just felt kind of flat and uninspiring, therefore in my book becoming ridiculous, because this is supposed to be the remix palette when really it just looks kind of boring. But if you take it apart, you have a lot of great potential in here, but because of the way it was put together, it just felt flat. It just fell really flat for me. I also want to talk about a collaboration. I'm talking about the Too Faced and Pretty Mess collaboration. I thought it was ridiculous when it first came out, and now I think, like, I still think that it's ridiculous because of just the names and the way that this was marketed and just like the entire aesthetic of the collection. You have like names such as this and packaging slogans such as this, and then like the entire collection just is so like very vanilla. So it's kind of like you have like this weird juxtaposition between danger, danger, and then like basic Too Faced. It's so weird. I mean, like, it just seemed very like forced to me, and this was like another like example of Too Faced basically trying to like push a collection based on aesthetics and packaging and marketing. You know what I mean? It just didn't necessarily seem like all that hype, like everything, like every sneak peek that was coming out was worth the actual product once you actually looked at it, because the entire collection just looked so gimmicky and just didn't necessarily look very inspiring whatsoever. So yeah, I thought that was ridiculous because I mean, you have these names, which is so interesting. Love that. I definitely want to own that. And yeah, so I thought it was ridiculous. This was like a waste of packaging space because like essentially you have, yeah, the Pretty Mess, and you're trying to like, it's so on the nose, like you're trying to basically have eyeshadow pans like in like very haphazard positions when really you are wasting palette space, essentially, and it doesn't necessarily look aesthetically pleasing whatsoever. In fact, it looks like a jumbled, gimmicky mess, and not in a good way. This next launch is from Makeup Forever. Around the springtime, they launched the Let's Gold eyeshadow palette, and what I found ridiculous about this eyeshadow palette was the lack of gold in here. I mean, you had like a few little bit of gold here and there, but overall, this eyeshadow palette was just like a sea of just metallic neutrals and not much else. And then the fact that it was kind of like it was themed gold, which just made no sense to me. And just like looking at this eyeshadow palette, I don't get inspired, you know? And a lot of times, like, I like certain neutral palettes, you know, like I love color obviously, but then I look at certain neutral palettes and I'm like, hey, that's a really good, well done, edited neutral palette. I can see a lot of people really loving it. This, not so much. So many of the shades look super similar. The aesthetics of this palette is just black. This seemed like them trying to like stuff like whatever vaguely gold shade they could into a giant palette when really it could have been done so much better if they had just condensed it like a lot and created like just an edited version of a gold palette. That would have been so beautiful, but instead we got this. This is another one that I forgot about, but now I am like reliving this nightmare. I'm talking about the Zoella and ColourPop collab. When this came out, I was like literally like I was so inspired to do several videos talking about this collab. I redesigned this entire collab. That was super fun. And yeah, I basically talked about how I didn't like this collab. This is basically the Brunch Day Palette, and Zoella made like a big show of like talking about like how she named certain colors of this palette, and she basically vlogged how like they were creating this palette when really like all they were creating, or all they seemed to be creating, were the names and the theme, and that's it. But yeah, this is the Brunch Day collection. You had the palette there, you had the lip stuff, you had the blush, you had like some liners, things, just a whole bunch of stuff in here. And see, like it was Brunch Day themed, and it was like they could have just like run with that theme, and they could have like done something really fun with it, but instead they came out with something that was so incredibly neutral, and then for some reason you had like that pop of blue in there. I guess that could make sense if you're having like blueberries with your brunch or whatever, but like it just doesn't make much sense. It just seems so gimmicky. The packaging was definitely more exciting than the actual product inside, and I just felt like it was ridiculous for those reasons. The next ridiculous launch I want to talk about is from Morphe. They revealed their Bronze Goals Artistry palette, their 35G palette. later on in the year, and oh my goodness. My issue with Morphe, I have many issues with Morphe, but one of my big issues is their tendency to release very similar shades in palettes. They have huge palettes. They have 35 shades in their palettes, right? And you have so many similar variations of the same kinds of shades in those palettes, it kind of gets a little bit uninspiring. And this was not like the worst case scenario of them doing that, but still I do think that in 2019 they could have just like made it a little bit more of a smaller palette. They could have just varied the shades a little bit. They could have made it a little bit more exciting, because what happened with this palette? They launched it, people talked about it for 5 seconds flat, and then nobody talked about it since. That's why I think it's ridiculous. It was just like a waste of time, everybody's time really, I think. And they could have just made it look so much more unforgettable simply by just making it smaller and making the shades a little bit more varied. That would have been wonderful. This is the Kat Von D vegan eyeshadow palette, and there are several reasons why I classify this palette as being ridiculous. Number one, the fact that it has vegan on the front. It's kind of like you are literally trying to, like, it's so obvious that Kat Von D, who at this point was a very, kind of struggling makeup brand, let's just be honest. At this point, nobody was really talking about the brand. I don't know if many people have been talking about them since, but it was clear that they were trying to, like, just grasp at straws to get people to, like, buy their palette, and the fact that they had, like, vegan on the front of the palette. A subtle way of attracting vegan people, I guess. You know. But also, if you look inside the palette, it's just like a very rainbow color story. And it's kind of like they did rainbow in a way that was completely uninspiring, and this is the same brand that released the Mi Vida Loca palette that everybody was head over heels in love with, because that was a beautiful palette that had so many colors in it. But then they had this palette, and it's kind of like you literally have primary colors in here, you have secondary colors, and then you have neutrals. And it's kind of like we all have these shades in our collections, so why are you releasing them again, but making it vegan? It just, at some point, Kat Von D just plummeted, not only because of the scandal, but also because of the lack of creativity in every single one of their launches. Not every single one, but like this was one of them. Next up, I would love to talk about Jacqueline Hill Cosmetics, specifically about the lipsticks. I have done several videos on this topic. I was like super like into it when this like whole debacle happened, mostly because I was such a big fan of Jacqueline Hill at some point, and I was like, I really felt betrayed by the fact that she just seemed like, or that she puts herself out there like being so for her fans when her actions completely contradicted that. So I will put my videos that I did on this launch on the screen right now so you can see what they look like, and I'll also put them in the cards. So yeah, watch that if you want to see me like rant and rave about that situation. But yeah, I just feel like this was like so hyped up, and like the entire thing that unfolded from that was highly entertaining to watch, by the way, but at the same time really tragic, because as far as I know, people still have not been refunded for whatever that was. Also, Kylie Skin, one of the big examples of a celebrity basically using their name and general flawless appearance to market a skincare line when in reality they don't know what they are selling. Skincare is a science. It is literally a science. There is a reason why dermatologists have to be certified before they can be dermatologists, and Kylie Jenner obviously does not know skincare, and the fact that she had a walnut scrub in her line is so indicative of that. I did not know actually how harmful a walnut scrub was until I started like looking into everybody's opinions on this. And yeah, apparently it is rather harmful. And I can't really comment on skincare because I'm not a skincare YouTube channel. But at the same time, I think that having a celebrity who has flawless skin market their line and try to make people think that they will get flawless skin by using these products that the celebrity obviously does not use, because they have a whole host of other treatments that they're using, plus plastic surgery. It's just a mess, and I thought that was ridiculous, which is why this launch is in this video. With that being said though, I've talked about a ton of makeup in this video, and to be honest, I am quite tired, so I'm just going to wrap it up right here. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that it was entertaining for you, and I really hope that this brings light to the fact that it is so easy to forget makeup products. I mean, 90% of everything I mentioned, I had completely forgotten about until I refreshed my memory, until I started looking into this year's past makeup releases. And it just goes to show that while some things can be so hyped up one moment, they can be completely forgotten about the next. So I hope that this was enjoyable for you. I hope that this was entertaining. Let me know if you want to see a part 2 to this video, because like there are clearly so many more releases to talk about. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys!